as I was talking about with taking Deming's 14 points and looking at number 13, especially on how do we help everyone learn and get better and be able to self-reflect on their own learning and make those choices for what they need in order to get better. We developed eventually what we call the Leander way. And all 14 points are in there somewhere. They just look very different. But one of the first ones that we really had to tackle, because as we're developing these systems and processes in order to be able to be a continuously improving district, we had to build trust that created the relationships that formed the foundation for an environment in which all of that can happen. And so if you look at point 8, it's drive out fear. And fear is something that is in all organizations, and it can truly be an obstacle to working together and to sharing what works, what doesn't work, and then coming up with what can work and how can we get better. So if you're looking at the whole relationship there, in order to get to the culture that we have today, we had to look at how we interacted and how we built that trust so that people would speak out and tell us and tell each other, more importantly, what was wrong, what was right, so that we can get better.
One of the things that we realized was important was that we model those behaviors that we expected to see throughout the system. And Deming talks about driving out fear and building trust. So we simply ask a focus group of staff, so what causes you the most fear in your system? What is it that is causing so much fear that's really pulling your attention away from the most important things? And to a person, they said, it's the teacher evaluation system. Now, very rarely are teachers actually non-renewed. We are fortunate enough to have people who are more than willing to continue to grow and learn. But still, to our very best and brightest teacher, it was a source of huge fear. So we said, okay, what can we do about it if that's something that truly is that fear-inducing? And at the time, there was a state rating and ranking system. And we didn't know that we could do anything about it, but we applied for a waiver to the state and said we don't want to do that anymore. We want to develop our own system that will be based more on improvement than it is just putting a number on somebody's ability, because that doesn't do anything to help you improve. And surprisingly, they granted it. So sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for, because then we were in the position of coming up with our own system of evaluation, and we debundled and separated what was expected by legalities, what we had to have in terms of evaluation, versus how can we develop a system that is based on providing feedback and information in order to improve. And that, I think that was huge on a couple of levels, both in terms of making staff realize that we're learning together, we're muddling through this together, and we're basing our next steps on the information we have, on what we can figure out, but that also we're listening. We're all in this together, and I think that was very important early on in terms of gaining trust and momentum for improvement as they began to realize that we were listening.
I kind of believe that if we want to be there, then the kids will want to be there. So what is it going to take for us to want to be here? Doesn't mean that there's not a rainy day that we want to stay home and read a book under the covers, because absolutely we do. But we want to be there, and kids will know if we don't. And you can't tease them or fool them. It's about being honest. It's about being okay with having a bad day. It's about asking for help. And because when I ask for help, I also empower them. I think I've never felt or acted like I have all the answers, because I don't. And they truly are experts in their field, and respecting that that all those kind of things together, I think, is what they feel that gives them the choices to reach out or ask questions or to take risks. And if we can create an environment where our teachers take risks, then they can turn around and create an environment where the kids take risks. And if they don't take risks, they won't learn and challenge themselves. I kind of talk about training the office staff. For example, if a teacher comes flying in and going, "We're out of pink construction paper, there's nothing in the back, and I have to have it like right now." And you go, again, you go back there, it's under the red, here it is, and you didn't see it. Okay, sorry, I'll look better next time, and off they go. And in their classroom, they're getting ready to do something, the child's going, "Can't find my pencil, can't find my pencil," and they'd go, "There it is, it's under your desk, where it always is," and gives it to them. Versus, "I'm out of pink construction paper, I need some. Come on back, let's find it. You're probably such a hurry, you didn't notice it, but I believe it's here. There you go. Is that going to be enough? Can I get you some more, or is that all right? No, that's great. Okay, here it is, good, and off you go." Same thing in the classroom. "Honey, it's on the floor. We'll wait just a minute till you get it and you're ready." It's all about how you treat people, how you react to them, how you make them feel. I know there's a saying that they're not going to remember what you say, but they're going to remember how you make them feel.
During this period of time, we were doing things that we had learned, which included what we came to know as developing our guiding documents. And those were things, like our purpose, our graduate profile, our systems diagram, actually identifying what our system looked like, and identifying ways that we could go about analyzing that system and actually developing ways to improve it. At the time, we developed a set of ethical principles, which really did help in ways that at the time I didn't know that it could help. So what we were developing was a set of guiding documents or philosophy in the district that ultimately would guide us and would become kind of, it would become our culture. And really, looking back on it, that's what you have to do. You have to subtly, and over a period of time, create a culture of quality and continuous improvement. It can't be just standing up and saying, "This is what we're going to do, here's the things you need to do, and here's how we're going to do it." It really has to be a whole lot more subtle than that. It has to be things that you as a leader, and as a leader, I'm talking about Monta and Wendy and Nancy and teachers, and actually students in some situations. It has to be those people who other people listen to over and over and over again, saying the right things and asking the right questions in order to transform that culture into one where people are comfortable with having those things said and those questions being asked.
At first, when you ask people, "How can you improve things?" then they think that what they're doing is not good. And now I think it's just a natural part of our culture. We would never be satisfied with what is. I think that we naturally ask ourselves, we're here, but we can get better. And the same thing with how do you know? We gave ourselves permission as a group to say, ask each other, how do you know? Ask each other, how can we make this better? Until it became a part of our normal dialogue, until it became a part of the culture. then when you begin asking different questions, then it changes the conversation. I think those questions that you ask, that you continually put in front of you, are key to making a transformation.
David had at one point suggested, after we had complained about the lack of opportunity for training, that we set up our own conference. And Monta and her staff, Anita, came up with the concept of our February Continuous Improvement Conference.
I think one of the things that we first took to heart that we could get our hands around was Deming's 14 points. And we studied those 14 points, and we would use those 14 points in working with our administrators or working with groups of teachers to say, what does that mean in education? What does that mean in your job? What do we do with this? And as we have been prone to do throughout all of this, we eventually Leander sized the 14 points and hoped that he would appreciate what we did with them to get them into education. But we looked at, for instance, point number 13, which is about educating everyone learning and improving within your district. And when you look at how important that is, we can't do this with a committee. It has to come from everyone. So how do we get that done? And one of the ways that we began to do that was to develop systems and processes by which we could all learn together. In 1994, we decided to take a really big leap of faith. And Langford had encouraged us to look at doing a conference. It's impossible to send everyone in your district to a professional conference. You just can't do it. So we decided we would have our own, and we would have a 2-day conference, and we would have multiple sessions concurrent with keynote speakers and a closing speaker and everything that would emulate a professional conference that we could send people to. One of the big things was choice. No one was directed to go to session A, B, and C. They could look at the program and they could choose what they wanted to go to. The other thing we did that first time that was quite a risk was, in services, you always had to sign in to prove that you were there. Everywhere. Every teacher in the world, anybody who goes to anywhere, you have to sign in to show that you were there. And we decided there would be no sign-in. You come, you go to your sessions, you learn from each other, and away you go. And we had trained people very well, so they were very nervous about not having something that could be signed. So we made out a little chart and put it in the front hall and let everybody know that they could go pick one of these up if they wanted to and take it to the sessions that they were attending and ask that the presenter sign that they were there. And that made a lot of people feel a lot better, and some of them used it, some of them didn't. But the thing we got on that first evaluation was, number one, 85% of the people said literally, "Thank you. We know you took a risk, and we appreciate being treated as professionals." And we went from there. The other thing that we kept getting through the years, for a few years, was, all right, we have this 2-day conference. We learn from each other. We have all these great ideas that we've learned, and then we go back into the classroom and hit the floor running. We need a day. We need another day so that we can go back to our campuses, share what we've learned, have some time to get with our teams and say, what are we going to do with this? And actually have time to do some planning. What a novel idea. And so we did go to 3 days, and these are instructional days that the state has allowed us to waive so that we can have staff development. That was a modeling of the feedback system within continuous improvement. We asked you how we could improve, and what you told us was that you needed another day. And now you have it.
And I think one of the things that made the February conference, Continuous Improvement Conference, successful is that a lot of teachers in a conference want things that are specific to their area of expertise. A history teacher wants to go and talk about history. An elementary teacher wants to go and make things that they can use in their classroom. And one of the things that I think made it successful is that Monta and Anita held fast to the fact that what we wanted this to be was a conference centered around how we go about educating students and not necessarily what it is we present to them. And so I think that helped the February conference change our culture to a degree, to help people understand how to go about the act of education instead of what it is you're trying to get across to students.
It was hard at first. We went out and begged people to present sessions at those first couple of conferences. Number one, people didn't want to stand out. There was fear. Number two, some of them thought, well, I'm not doing anything special, so why would anybody want to come and hear what I have to say and what my kids are doing? And as we began to convince people, and principals would work with teachers, and departments and our support staff would work with their people to say, look, this is what you've done. You did a PDSA in order to work on a process, and this is the result, and look how many people that impacts. You need to share the process so that others can look and say, what would that mean in what I do? And it evolved slowly to where you would hear at this year's conference people talking about, oh, and next year what I can do is. And so they slowly reached that point of, I can teach this. And that's the highest point that you can get in any learning process, and that was part of it.
I remember at one February conference, Monta and her staff had developed the Leander Way game. And basically it's a board game that had philosophical questions and the answers that you had to ask and answer in order to advance on the board. And people sat down at the conference and enjoyed playing the game and didn't question really anything about the fact that was who we are and how we go about educating students. So I think that came probably over a period of a couple of years after we were much more informal about how we went about educating people and continuing to help them understand how to get better in terms of the continuous improvement philosophy. We quit calling it anything. We kept pressing. We kept highlighting those people who we thought were exemplifying what we wanted. And over a period of a couple of years, it I guess just kind of clicked, and people actually didn't question it anymore. And this came with a lot of work in terms of continuing to educate people over and over and over and over again. and we continued to learn new things by bringing people like Myron Tribus and Brian Cole and lots of other people. I mean, Monta and I and several others actually got the opportunity early on to go to a Deming conference and listen to Dr. Deming. So it really was persistence and in continuing to push it and not wavering on the fact that this is the direction that we want to go.
But how do we continue the learning in a deeper way was another question we had. What are other opportunities for people to hear the words, to get the modeling, to take it back, to practice it? And we came up with a Continuous Improvement Institute. And this institute is 6 meetings throughout the year, 3 hours at a time. We bring people in, they sign up for the whole year, serve them a light dinner, and we take little chunks of the philosophy and the practicality of what continuous improvement means in Leander ISD, following the Leander way, and looking at our other guiding documents and applying it in a way that they can get the depth to take back to their classrooms, work with students, because our ultimate goal is that the students also begin to assimilate all of this as just part of how you learn. They don't need to be taught the theory as much as they need to think, this is just the way it is.
We developed people with additional expertise that we call process improvement facilitators, and they don't receive additional money or any kind of stipend for this, but they do, they have the privilege of going to even more training and becoming more knowledgeable in order to help groups. So we have process improvement facilitators that help people as they go through that, go through an improvement team, that those people have more knowledge, and it makes it to hold people's hand a little bit if they're a little uncomfortable about the process or what they need to do. So I think that's an example also of how we started with a core group and then said, as we grow larger, how are we going to be able to support that? And I think, and right now we're at a point we realize that we probably don't have enough process improvement facilitators to meet the demand that we have of growing districts. And that's a new problem that we're, in fact, doing a PDSA on. How do we have effective process improvement facilitators to fill the need, as well as having all of those improvement efforts aligned and not pulling against each other.
But the Continuous Improvement Institute was really able to take small groups of people, have them work together, have them go into their classrooms and apply the learning, come back and talk about what they did, how they did, what worked, what didn't work, another way of bringing down the fear and learning from each other, because that's the way it happens. The first one we did at the end of that year, the people who were graduating from our Continuous Improvement Institute said, okay, what's next? We want a level 2 Continuous Improvement Institute. So we had a level 2 and a level 1, and eventually we had a level 3. And it began to be more than that. We couldn't keep going. So I think right now we're pretty much at the level 1, and then other ways to work with people to continue their learning, and the fact that they become the leaders on their campuses in teaching others what they're doing. When the person next door says, how do your students do that? How do you get them to do that? It's a perfect time for those just-in-time learnings.
At first, when you ask people how can you improve things, then they think that what they're doing is not is not good. And now I think it's just a natural part of our culture. We would never be satisfied with what is. I think that we naturally ask ourselves, we're here, but we can get better. And the same thing with how do you know? We gave ourselves permission as a group to say, ask each other, how do you know? Ask each other, how can we make this better? Until it became a part of our normal dialogue, until it became a part of the culture. Then when you began asking different questions, then it changes the conversation. I think those questions that you ask, that you continually put in front of you, are key to making a transformation.
What we saw, and this really goes back to changing that culture, is we saw instances of teachers, bus drivers, administrators, nurses. We saw instances of people actually using the philosophy and processes. And what we tried to do in the February conference and in many other ways, tried to identify those people and highlight what they were doing and use them as examples for other people to follow. So what we tried to do is celebrate those successes that people were having. You've probably heard, some of the stories of teachers in their classroom with very, very simple little examples of using the continuous improvement philosophy. A second grade teacher figuring out that by using data and working with the students, figuring out that how they're arranging their classroom is not conducive to the students getting their work done. And in terms of using data and working with the students, figuring out a better way to do that. So, we bring those people in the February conference and have them do a session and talk about how they're going about it. At the time, poor Manta, I was using her as a communications person, a public relations person, and she would sit down and write articles for the newspaper about how a teacher was using the philosophy, and we wouldn't call it anything. We didn't say this is quality in action. We just said, here's a teacher who's using a new way of working with students to improve what's going on in the classroom.